Hey guys, FilmCrazyAdam here. To those of you that have just stumbled across this channel, I appreciate you rolling the dice and I hope you enjoy what you see. To those of you that continue to roll the dice for some reason, I really appreciate you coming back. I hope I can continue to entertain you, and I hope you continue to enjoy what you see. Anyway, pleasantries out of the way, let's get to the video that you really came to see. Hello and welcome to a new series of videos that I'm going to start putting out called Adventures in Bad Script Writing. The purpose of this series is to shine a spotlight on unforgivable faux pas, cliches, plot holes, and other crimes associated with bad and lazy writing. As many of you know, I am a huge proponent when it comes to story. In fact, to me, that's all that's important, is the story. If it's a good story, that's all you need. And I'll go into more detail in this video about that. But today, we're going to start off this video series by talking about what you are allowed to expect from fantasy and science fiction movies and TV shows. That might sound a little confusing the way that I have it written. What am I allowed to expect from fantasy and science fiction is how I want to present it to you. And even that doesn't really give any much explanation to the point I'm trying to make. So let me just jump into it and I will explain what I'm allowed, what not just me, but what you are allowed to expect from science fiction and fantasy. So it is no dark kept secret from the world that I am a very avid watcher of many different narrative driven media, i.e. movies, TVs, and anime. In fact, those that know me know that my consumption of all these is quite ravenous, if not straight up rabid. My taste in all of these spans numerous genres, including but not limited to science fiction, fantasy, action, drama, thriller, psychological dramas, young audience, suspense, and the occasional horror. I'm leaving out one or two, but moving on. These tastes encompass productions as recent as Top Gun Maverick with Tom Cruise and stretch back to the 1940s, almost 100 years ago, including such films as Dark Passage with Humphrey Bogart. It is also well known in many circles that I have somewhat strong opinions when it comes to movies. I will always and forever preach that story is everything. Having a good story and good fleshed out characters really is all you need. I mean, think about it. Like stage productions, as far back as in the days of William Shakespeare, there was no production value to those things, but it had good stories and good characters, and that's all you needed. Moving forward, it still really is, to present day, it really is all you still need. Everything else, all the bells, the whistles, the lighting, the music, everything else is just icing on the cake. You can forgive a lot in a production if you just have those two things. For example, movies like Star Wars: A New Hope or the original Ghostbusters or Terminator 1 had special effects that were okay to subpar, but are still beloved because the story and the characters are what were memorable in those movies. Like in Star Wars Episode 4, we all noticed the blotch under the land speeder distorting the very obvious fact that they just smudged some Vaseline on the lens to block out the tires of the prop car, or the bad layering for the ghosts in Ghostbusters, or the herky-jerky stop motion of the T-800 in Terminator. But you didn't care about that because your attention and focus wasn't on that. It was on the epic story unfolding on screen before you, as well as the fantastic chemistry between the quirky characters.
It's just occurred to me we really haven't had a completely successful test of this equipment.
I blame myself.
So do I.
Well, no sense worrying about it now.
Why worry? Each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back.
Yep. Let's get ready. Switch me on.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. We thought you were someone else.
Not the special effects. Those were only afterthoughts, usually forgotten with the ending of that scene. You can forgive sets, music, special effects, wardrobe, and in some cases even bad editing if the story is good. Let me go on record as saying that there are a number of good movies with some shoddy editing. Like Legend with Tom Cruise, I will always say is one of them. The editing in that movie, at least in certain parts, is not good. But it's still a good movie. But like I said, it's unforgivable if your story sucks. And the primary cause for a bad story, after bad writing, is what are known as plot holes. A plot hole simply is some kind of inconsistency in a story that flies in the face of, or in some cases directly spits in the face of, logic. These come in many forms, like a lot of forms, way too many forms to get into examples of at this time. But if you're ever curious of what a plot hole is, just watch any movie directed by J.J. Abrams. I promise you that without resorting to exaggeration or hyperbole, you can easily find about 24 plot holes in any of his movies, any and all of his movies. And this leads into my point of what am I allowed to expect in movies, but specifically in sci-fi and fantasy. This is what I refer to as an idiot argument, though to call it an argument isn't quite correct, because it's not an argument, it's a cop-out.
There are two kinds of people in the world, my friend.
There are people who have expectations and people who just want to watch fireworks. What the hell does that even mean? This argument is something I've heard way too often when I start breaking down a movie. I've heard it from people, friends, and commenters on my channel. And this is what they say. I don't pay that close attention. I like to just shut off my brain and be entertained. I like going into a movie and knowing I don't have to think for the next 2 hours. Shut off my brain. See, those are the people who only want to watch fireworks. Now, what does that mean? As we all know, fireworks are brilliant light show displays fired off into the night sky to punctuate the end of a day of celebration, mainly used during national holidays like 4th of July or New Year's Eve. Depending on what combination of elements was packed into the mortar will dictate what different colors and designs it will generate when it explodes. What it all boils down to is it's just a bunch of pretty colors flashing before your eyes. I mean, that's it. That's all that it is. There is truly no thought required to enjoy fireworks. I mean, it appeals to one of our most basic brain functions, which is identifying different colors, shapes, and designs. They are simple to the nth degree. There is no narrative, there is no deep thought or understanding, no higher level of education or even sentience required to gawk in awe at fireworks. Humans of all ages will stop and stare at the spectacle of fireworks because they're pretty. Even animals, things that have no sentience, will stop and stare. Not so much out of wonder, but more so because they heard this loud explosion and the sight of something unfamiliar in front of them kind of has their attention, they're kind of locked on that. So yeah, fireworks are the pinnacle of shutting off your brain for entertainment. Now, do not mistake this as an attack on fireworks or even people that watch fireworks, because I am right there in the front row on the 4th of July when those suckers start going off. And after all, they are pretty to look at. They are amazing and beautiful, but it requires no brain power whatsoever to enjoy them. Now, the other type of person is the one that goes into a movie or a TV show who wants more than just to be distracted like a cat with a laser pointer. If I'm going to spend my time watching something, I want it to be worth my time. To go back to the food analogy, going to the movies is like going to a restaurant. You wouldn't drive across town, wait in line, and then spend a decent amount of money, get served something that was just terrible, and then not drop a 1-star review on Yelp, right? Or at the very least, if you didn't drop it on Yelp, you would tell all your friends, oh, do not go there. Do not go to that place. It sucks. Which is what I do with movies. Do not go watch that. It is god-awful. So yeah, when I go to a movie, I have expectations based on what I saw from the trailer, the source material, if it is based on something, and the genre of the production. Yes, I go in every single movie with a degree of expectations. It does not matter. Science fiction, fantasy, children's movies, horror movies. Everything I go see, I go in with some degree of expectations. And that brings me to my next point, which is actually really is a continuation of the argument about shutting down your brain. And what that is after I've started my movie breakdown, others will say to me this idiot statement. It's science fiction. What do you expect? It's fantasy. What do you expect? It's fiction-based. What do you expect? It's a comic book movie. Like, the fuck do I expect? I will tell you the fuck do I expect. Now, it does not matter. It literally does not matter what genre your movie is. Your movie is based in some form of reality. Science fiction, fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, swords and sorcery settings, Tolkien. These are, Star Wars, Star Trek. There is actual basis in reality in literally all of them. Because here's the thing, and do please correct me if I'm wrong. In all of these, there are universal constants that are constant in our reality, things that actually do not need explanation. But for some reason, I get people like hand waving and going, what? Why do you have a problem with that? When I ask simple, fundamental things that are not affected by the fact that it's science fiction or fantasy. Example, night follows day. Unless you are on an alien planet, and movies go out of their way to explain this, like in Pitch Black.
They seem to stick to darkness, so if we stick to daylight, we should be all right.
A total eclipse.
They go out of their way, like we're on a planet, but there's never nighttime unless there's this weird eclipse. TV shows, movies, they go out of their way to let you know that you're on an alien planet when it matters to the plot. But unless the plot actually says specifically that, the number of, a day on this planet is 2 hours long and then followed by 30 days of night, you can run on the assumption that it's a regular day, that it's a 24-hour day. Day, night. That when it's daytime, the sun is out. When it's nighttime, the moon is out. If you're on an alien planet, maybe there's more than one moon. But oftentimes, even in fantasy settings, there's only one moon in the sky. There's stars in the sky. I can expect this. Again, unless the movie specifically says that's not a thing, I can actually go into every single movie and TV show and expect night to follow day in a regular 24-hour period. I can expect that, freezing temperatures are a thing. That if you are outside without a jacket on in the middle of winter and there is a blizzard blowing in, that you should die from exposure. That you will freeze to death. Movies like the prequel, the 2010 prequel to The Thing, which was just called The Thing, where you have characters out in the snow with no face coverings in Antarctica, or no, better yet, in Man of Steel, when Lois gets just dropped off in the Arctic Circle. She barely has a jacket on, and yet she doesn't die from exposure during the night, despite the fact that a character in that movie said, don't go out at night, you'll die from exposure.
Temperatures drop to minus 40 at night around here. Wouldn't find your body till after spring.
So yes, like shit like that, I can be pissed off and be like, that's bullshit. When even the movie itself says, don't do this, and then it does it, and then it doesn't follow its own rules. So yes, freezing cold. I can run on the assumption that anything under 0 degrees Fahrenheit will kill you when left out overnight without a jacket on. Inversely, I can expect in science fiction and fantasy that if you were in the middle of a desert and you do not have a canteen full of water, you will die from dehydration. That you will fry. That you will die from exposure. Food. That if people do not eat food, they will die from starvation or malnourishment. If you don't eat, you die. This is not something that needs explanation. This is not something that needs to be defined to me in a science fiction and a fantasy movie. No, if you don't eat, you die. Water, same thing. You don't drink water, you will die from dehydration. Or inversely, too much water will kill you. If you are underwater and you do not have gills or some kind of magic that allows you to breathe underwater, then you will drown. You will die. Again, I do not need someone to... You can't hand wave that away. If a human goes underwater for an hour, they're dead. Tell me I'm wrong. Breathing, on that note, breathing air. You don't breathe air, you die. If you are too high in the mountains and you have the air is too thin, you suffer from altitude sickness. If you step outside of a spaceship with no spacesuit on, you will die. You're in the vacuum of space. There's no air. There's extremes in temperature. You will die. Like in Star Wars Episode 8, when Leia just hangs out in space for like a minute and she's not dead. No, fuck you. That's bullshit. Like I said before, night follows day. Unless specifically stated otherwise, I can expect that it will roll just like that. That you can set your watch to it. Hunting. When somebody hunts something, if you shoot a deer or a rabbit, I can expect that when you cut it open, there's going to be blood, guts, and meat in there. It's not going to be full of cotton candy or balloons. So yes, I have expectations. There are certain things that you cannot change unless specifically the movie goes out of its way to say, this is different. You know, fairy tales. Back in the day, back in the 1500s, when or whenever the Grimm's brothers wrote the fairy tales, they didn't have to explain gravity because no one needs explanation of fucking gravity. Gravity's a thing. It's a constant. I don't need to explain gravity. So yes, when I watch a fantasy movie, unless somebody has the fly spell, or if I watch a sci-fi movie and they're like, yes, we're on a planet where gravity is 10 times that of Earth, or it's quarter that of Earth, then yes, I can assume that literally everywhere has the exact same gravity and it's ours. You know, gravity, air, grass, trees with leaves on them. I don't need explanation. And yes, I can expect that unless you say that this tree generates gummy bears, like in Willy Wonka, and he does, he's like, you know, you can eat the flowers here. He has a whole song about it. So yes, fantasy, sci-fi, I can go in with expectations, and no, you can't just hand wave away stuff under the banner of, it's science fiction. What do you expect? It's fantasy. What do you expect? It's a comic book. What do you expect? You know, things like time, distance, sound. These things are universal constants, even in science fiction and fantasy. Even if it's a fantasy, even if it's a science fiction based movie. If you are in New York City and you need to get to Tokyo, unless you actually say, well, I've got a starship or I've got transporters, I can just teleport over there, or I'm the Flash, I can literally run there in half a second. Unless you have these abilities, I can actually assume that it will take you the better part of a fucking day to get from New York to Tokyo. No, it is not out of the realm of expectation. No, I am not wrong in putting these expectations in place. You know, sound is a thing. Like, if I yell within my house, you're not going to hear it a block away. If there's an explosion here in my house and there's like a sub basement and like you're in a cavern underground, you're not going to hear it. You know, you're 800 feet below, you're not going to hear it. Like I said, distance is a thing. Time is a thing. You know, it takes time to travel distances unless you have technology, unless you have magic. Like, for me to walk from here to the grocery store, it would take me like an hour to walk there, or it would take me 10 minutes by car. So if you are just running on the ground, no, it doesn't make sense that you would traverse 200 miles in a day. Horseback, that's a different story. Starship, that's a different story. So yes, am I getting worked up? Fuck yes. Because I'm sick and tired of people throwing that in my face, saying like, oh, it's fiction. What do you expect? Fuck you, because yes, I can have expectations. Unless the movie goes out of its way and says, it's not like that, then I can expect it to be that. In Star Wars, gravity is a constant. Air is a constant, except for in that one movie where Leia evidently can breathe in space. In Star Wars Episode 1, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan need breathing apparatuses underwater or else they'll drown. So no, you know, hand waving away is bullshit. And inevitably, oh my God, always like night follows day. The argument that always follows on the heels of, well, what do you expect? It's science fiction and fantasy. After I make a stink over that part, it's always followed by, well, they didn't specifically say that couldn't happen in the movie. Like, I've been saying right now that they need to specifically say it happens. Then the counter argument is, well, they didn't say it couldn't happen. Man, fuck you. Fuck you, man. That is, well, it's fantasy, what do you expect is a cop-out. This is a cop-out for a cop-out. Because, shit, you know, my counter-argument to your argument is always going to be the same, which is my peanut butter argument. If you've seen my other videos, you know what it is. If you haven't seen my other videos, it's this. It's that nowhere in my corporate handbook, my company's corporate handbook, does it say I cannot show up to work with no pants and a jar of peanut butter on my junk. Nowhere. Nowhere does it even say the words peanut or butter in my company's corporate handbook. That being said, you know, if I tried that, I'd be fired and arrested. And the argument of, well, it didn't say I couldn't in my corporate handbook would not really fly with my boss or the arresting officer. So no, that is like, it is such a lazy argument. I always think to myself, like, why are you arguing against this fact? Like, there is nothing that you can say other than this lazy, limp-wristed hand-waving, trying to change the subject or obfuscate or detract from the fact that I just called you out on something that's really obvious. But maybe you didn't notice it, and so it's a little embarrassing for people. Huh, they're right. That is like that. I mean, one of the things I found is that when you put other people under attack for liking something, you know, people get really defensive really quick. But that's another story and another video for another day. You know, to continue my counter argument for, well, it didn't specifically say that, I have actually looked this up. Try getting on an airplane in the United States wearing just a Speedo. You know, no pants, no shirt, no shoes. Just try it. I dare you. I looked this up. There is literally nowhere in the federal regulations, in the FAA, there is literally nothing that dictates what you can and cannot wear or what you're required to wear on an airplane. Literally nothing. But I dare you to go to the airport and try to get on an American Airlines flight with nothing but a Speedo on and be like, hey, the regulations didn't say I had to wear anything else. I dare you to try that. See, I've developed this theory, or not this theory, but this concept of what I call the box. The box is the rules that define any given movie or TV show. They follow a very specific set of rules, and the show dictates what they are or develops them as it goes along. And so as viewers and as audience members, as fans of these different IPs and these different TV shows and movies, we'll watch them and we'll understand and we'll pick up on them. And so from movie to movie, from episode to episode, from season to season, you know, things remain consistent. Like in Star Wars episodes 1 through 6, there was massive amounts of consistency, which makes sense because it was all written by the same guy. And then you get to 7, and then suddenly things, you know, and then there's stuff that they're pulling out of their ass. Like, again, Leia can breathe in space for some reason. Leia, for some reason, is a Jedi Knight, which was never a thing. Or if not a Jedi Knight, was like on par or better than Luke. Bottom line is that every TV show, every movie, there is a set parameter of rules that dictate what can and can't happen in that show. You know, like in Star Wars, warp speed is a thing. We understand that. And warp speed is dictated by certain rules. There's limitations to it. So when you can get from one side of the galaxy to the other in like 38 seconds, not like we understand. Like if it's just the Enterprise, like, oh yeah, I just did that. You're like, bullshit, it did, because it's never done that before. And there's nothing that's changed to allow it to do that. Now, if it's a different ship, a new piece of technology, or, you know, some form of alien technology that was just introduced into this episode or this movie, okay. You know, it's you're making allowances based on new additional stuff. New parameters to the box. Every other ship has to go at normal warp speed. This can go at like hyper warp speed. You know, stuff like that. You know, lightsabers have been clearly defined as basically these weapons that can destroy anything. Their edges are basically laser sharp. They somehow generate heat equal to like the surface of the sun, but it doesn't like vaporize anyone around them. But you can insert it through steel like a hot knife through butter. These are very lethal weapons. Like if you get one run through you, you're dead. It burned up some kind of vital organ and you're dead. Or it can cut through anything. It can cut off hands. That's usually the go-to with these things is like they're really good at removing hands. But they cut through anything. So like in the TV series Obi-Wan Kenobi, where Reva has been stabbed by a lightsaber like 3 times and in the next episode she's fine. You know, that's one of the many problems with that TV show. I mean, there's many more problems than that. That's barely scratching the surface. But shit like that, where it's like, lightsabers used to be lethal, and now, like, you know, you can just brush them off. You know, they're about as lethal as stubbing your toe on the coffee table. So shit like that. Like, movies and TV shows have parameters. There are rules that dictate them. So when you start breaking your own rules, that's when I get mad. That's when other fans get mad. That's when we start calling out bullshit and be like, wow, what the hell just happened? Why did that happen? That makes no sense. Again, unless it's something integral to the plot, where something that just flies in the face of everything. Like, if you have a vampire and it can walk out in daylight, that right there is an issue, or like that right there is like, oh wow, like that is your plot right there. It's like, okay, we got vampires that can go out in daylight. Why is that? Now, if you've had an entire series of movies or games or TV shows where up until this point vampires go out in sunlight and they disintegrate, and now all of a sudden one guy can, which is what they did in the Blade series of movies, where you had every vampire, they go out in sunlight, unless if they didn't have some kind of sunscreen on, they were toast. Except in the third movie, where it was actually like basically the origin, the being that originated vampires. So as the progenitor of these things, of course, he has abilities that others don't. So it was cool. So like, oh wow, okay, so this guy was badass, and that was the whole plot of the movie. It focused on just this one character. Getting back to my point, what can I expect from science fiction and fantasy? I can have expectations. No. Now, there's a huge difference between forgiving a movie for lacking in production and just turning off your brain. Fireworks, like I said, is a perfect example of just shutting off your brain and being able to enjoy it with requiring literally zero thought to be amused. If you just don't have the budget for something, but you have the story there, again, that's all you need. So in the end, what does this all come down to? What it all comes down to is that does not matter. Science fiction, fantasy, horror, it does not matter. What genre is irrelevant. What it comes down to is just because the story is fiction-based doesn't give it a blank check or a get-out-of-jail-free card for shitty writing. Your genre might be fiction, but your rules ain't. So yes, in the end, I am allowed to have expectations when going into movies. Plain and simple. So using that as an excuse, don't even. So it's fantasy, it's science fiction. What do I expect? You know what I expect. I expect decent writing, and I expect you to follow your own fucking rules. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Talk to you later. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please hit like and subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you didn't like what you saw, well, I appreciate you watching all the way to the end, and I hope you come back, because maybe I'll have a video in the future that you do like. Other than that, if anyone out there has anything that they wish that I would review, please let me know, and I'll try and get to it. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.